Let's Sew Easy Pants series is back, and today we are fine-tuning the feet of the thighs, the calf and the tummy. Very practical video with lots of visual aids for you, same as the other ones in this series, so keep watching. Hi sewing friends, my name is Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing. And today we return to Let's Sew Easy Pants, a mini series I have been running on the channel since late May. There are already 5 videos on this series on the channel, and I have designed them in a way to be a progression so that the information provided can build up on each other as the episodes continue. So if you have stumbled upon episode 6, which is today, for the first time, I highly suggest you go back and watch the other episodes that come in front. If you just watch this one straight up, there might be concepts here that you don't understand, because some of the processes that I will show build up on what I've already shown in the other episodes. So episode 1 was just me recommending you 5 pant patterns that could be easy for you to try on your first go. Easy to sew pull-on pants with an elasticated waist. I recommend 5 patterns there. Episode 2 talks about fabrics that are suitable for these types of pants, which ones to avoid. And then episode 3 gets into the nitty-gritty of how to measure yourself for pants, what areas to measure, how to measure your crotch length, including the front and the back separately. Lots of practical tips there, and then how you compare those measurements on your body to what is on the pattern. Episode 4 goes into adjusting that length of the crotch there on your pants, whether you need it to be shorter or longer in the front and the back. I show you ill-fitting muslins on my body so you can actually see what a short rise looks like, how uncomfortable it is and all that. And episode 5 dealt with those curves, the shape of the curve on the front crotch and the back, how we can adjust that curve to fit our bodies. Little tiny tweaks that can make all the difference in the look of the pants. You might notice I have started sort of from the top down, adjusting the rise first, fiddling with the shape of the curve, and now we're going below the crotch point there and seeing what is happening with those thighs. I mentioned early on in episode 4 that adjusting the thighs or moving that crotch extension, making it shorter or longer, was not the best way to adjust the total crotch length as a first step. Well, now I'm going to actually go and adjust that, but not because I want to make the crotch length shorter or longer, but because it has to do with how it fits on the thighs. So we're going to look at the situation where you have pants that you have fitted to yourself, you've made a muslin, you've measured your total front and back rise, and you have made the adjustments to make the pattern you're working with have those measurements plus the ease, so you're comfortable with that, you're comfortable with the feet on the waist and the hips. But then moving down, you have vertical folds and excess around the leg, just lots of space at the inseam, at the back of the leg and in the front of the leg. You just move the pant and it just feels super loose. You know, this could be a loose style of pant that you're working with in the style, but there is something to be said about a wider leg pant also being just too wide for you, you know? So let's see how that could look. I have fiddled with my muslins to no end. They are just looking completely deformed by now. But I have adjusted one of these to have a very loose leg and to see how that looks. Here are a pair that at first glance look okay from the front. The hips, the area here at the bottom, at the full hip, that looks good, the curve. But under there, you have a lot of space, like in between the legs. Just lots of folds. If you wiggle this, it looks like there's just too much room for the thighs. So they're quite loose here. The hips are fine, the hips are there, the thighs are lower, and it just seems loose here. Now we're gonna go over to the little pattern pieces I have been using so that you can see these things really up close and really clearly, and how you can make adjustments for this. Here we have a front and a back, and what we're looking at here is this area, the inseam. So if you feel that your pants are just too wide around the leg area, when you've measured yourself and you've modified your pants so that the back length and the front length are the same as what you measured, you might still find discrepancies in the fit if your thighs are smaller than what the pattern accounts for in this curve here. So the width from here that way, and this distance that goes from there to there and there to there is what is between the legs, And if the thighs are smaller than what the pattern has accounted for, the length of this curve here might be too long. The extension just might be too big for the body. So that is when adjustments in the thigh come. Find a place above the knee notch, see where the curve starts coming in, and find maybe a place a third in. It doesn't need to be that exact. And make a line there. There. So this is where you will cut and adjust. Now remember, the red lines there are the seam allowance, and you don't want to cut through seam allowances. You don't want to alter the length of the total inseam. So you would just be cutting to the seam allowance there. In your muslin, you can play by taking it in from the back and the front, both or one or the other, by little bits at a time until you're happy. When you're happy with how the thighs fit you, then you will go and modify the pattern like this to conserve the length of this inseam. So you don't want to be freehand or just cutting out from the center there. What you want to do is overlap. Now, especially in the front, you don't want to go too crazy and remove that much. You know, maybe remove 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. And same goes for the back. Maybe you need to remove 1/2 inch at the back. I'm just giving you random references because it depends on your body, of course. When you do that, you'll get a little bit of jaggedness. You just need to smooth that line out. You've just made this curve shorter. You've made this curve shorter, which means the distance between the center front and this point for both the front and the back is shorter, thus reducing the circumference here at the thigh level. Right there. You can also come and reduce the circumference here at the thigh level on the side of your pattern, but only by a little bit. So you could come in from the side and bring it in, say 1/4 inch like that on the side, and do the same here, bring it in. So this is below the hip. When you have measured your body and you know what your front measures and your back measures, including the waistband, if you have reduced here in this area, you might need to add back on in this area what you removed down there so that the length matches. You need to see how that fits on your body. For example, here I have front pattern pieces where I had shortened the rise by overlapping. You can see the overlap there. And the same here for the back. The back has an overlap that's shortened here. If I went ahead and shortened this area there, I might want to release this and overlap it a little bit less to account for what I removed from down there. So say you removed 1/4 inch, I might move this up by 1/4 inch just to make the length match in total, meaning you need more length up here than you do in the curve there. Just make sure that once you're happy with how your thighs fit in between the legs, that still the length is your length compared to the pattern. You might have already adjusted the rise length up here in a previous stage. If you have had to initially reduce the rise on the front, on the back, and then reduce the crotch extension in the back, in the front, either on just one of them or both of them, that combination of steps of reducing the length here and reducing the width here is what some people call a flat seat adjustment. I'm not actually calling these adjustments by name. I think it's more logical to do them in steps. I think it's easier to adjust this area first, determine this length in accordance to your body, that matches first. See how that fits on the waist, around the hips, and then go into the thighs and figure out what to do there. So if you've had to adjust thighs and then readjust what you've done there in a previous step, I think it will be easier for you to understand your body and what it needs. As you can tell, I'm not giving these adjustments technical names, trying to describe your body parts. Look, if you went and didn't make a muslin of a pair of pants and just made them straight from the printer or straight from the packet, and you found that you had a lot of excess length on the back and your thighs were super wide and you'd need to do a lot of adjustments all at once, meaning that you need to shorten the rise, take away from the crotch extension, do like a group of adjustments at once. Some people call that doing a flat seat adjustment, but actually if you've taken the precautions to measure yourself first adjust the pattern accordingly, have the total lengths match your body plus ease, then you're going to find that you might need to play around with how that length is distributed on that crotch curve, whether you need less at that curve at the crotch extension and more on the top, or vice versa. So that's why I'm not calling this a flat seat adjustment. I am just calling it that your thighs are smaller than what the pattern is drafted for, and that is how you can improve the fit. So have a look, make sure that after you've adjusted that crotch extension and you've done your overlap that fits you well, make sure that the length, the total length, is still the length that matches your body plus the ease that you want for the pants. And whether you need to adjust again at the rise and add a little bit more there, that is perfectly fine. It's all a process, and I'm assuming you're working with fabric that is non-valuable, that you are not trying to make a wearable muslin, so you can make all the changes you need. Now, in the opposite case, that you try on your pants and your thighs are fuller than what this pattern was drafted for, you will have the opposite happen. And I have also adjusted one of my muslin pants to try and show you how that looks like, how it feels, how the drag lines could sort of look, for you to get a good visual. When I move my legs, I can feel the pull right there. I don't know if you can see the lines, stress lines, horizontal lines coming across all the front, and it's super uncomfortable. When you stand sideways and your thighs have more muscle and fat, they tend to look rounded, bowing out a little bit. That is actually my case a little bit. The volume is usually in the front. In the back, it goes in. It's less volume here actually, because there's more volume here in the front of the thighs. It tends to want to pull the seam from the back to go to the front, and it gives you that separation of the buttocks that is not pretty. Very uncomfortable. There's just not enough space to go from here to there in between the legs for the width that the thighs have down here. So we can add to the crotch extension to just increase the area of the curve there, to give more space for this part right there. And it's not just about letting the side seams out, you know, it's about that inside. Now, to see on the mini pattern pieces, the lines that you draw and that you cut up to the seam line are the same. Now, I noticed in editing my proportions were completely correct. When I slashed on the front pattern piece, the line I slashed looks really short. Just make it longer to sort of mimic the one you've done at the back. A good distance, it doesn't have to reach the knee, because on the front the piece is just narrower and smaller. But definitely cut down a bit longer than what I've cut in these little practice pieces, because they are small and I did sort of lose my proportions there a little. I'd say if your thigh has a lot of muscle on the front and bows out, you might want to look at adjusting the front first and adding a little bit more to the front than to the back. It's all experimentation here, but maybe you want to open this there and add maybe 1/2 inch. Start small, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. At the back, you can also open this from there. We're not cutting through the seam allowance, so that the length from that tip down to the hem and the length from that tip down to the hem don't change. All that changes is the curve here. What happens if you had already added to the front rise, like you see in this one and in this one? Initially, when we've measured the body comparing to the pattern and adjusted this, we might have the total length here correct for the back. And that's why you see these adjustments there. But now that we see that we actually needed part of that length to be in this area and not that much in that area, you might need to reduce here as well what you've added there. So say you added 1/2 inch there. When you spread apart, you might need to reduce here and go ahead and cut some of this out. And then bring it back in like that. More of that length that your body needed is in this area than in that area there. In the front, the changes might be less pronounced. It is a smaller area after all, and this curve here is also smaller. So just be careful with the adjustments. If you needed to add there, you might need to reduce there, or you might not. Have a look at your muslin. If you find that the length is too much here, just pin out a dart on the front. It's easy to pin out a dart on yourself on the front. much easier than it is to try and do that at the back. And then you will end up with the same total front length, only that some of that length was needed in this area and not up here. Combination of these adjustments of adding length in this area and then adding to the thighs is then what some people call a full bottom adjustment or a full seat adjustment. I'm not calling them like that. As you can see, I would rather just you make adjustments that will fit your body, whether you need more length there or more width here at the thighs. You know, you can also add a little bit here on this area, just across to the side seam, but not that much. Just go easy, 1/4 inch, adjusting slightly, distributing that from here to there is okay. Just add what you need in this area. You've seen how that curve there can be modified to be longer so that you have more space in between the legs. You can also add a little bit to the side seams to add a little bit there for your thighs. You know, if you add 1/4 inch on the side seams, that gives you 1/2 inch because you have a front and the back. So you would have to adjust the front and the back, mimicking each other if you adjust the side seam. But it's very important to adjust the crotch extension because that is the area of the body where you need that extra space for you to walk, for you to sit, and to fit the thighs that you have. So depending on the shape of your thighs, where your muscle and fat is located, whether you need more in the front or in the back, you need to play with that. And that's why I hope that the muslin you're working with has at least I hope your muslin has at least 5/8 of an inch seam allowance so that you can let out and extend as much as you can. I have been known to be sewing right on the edge, like leaving 1/8 of an inch seam allowance there to get the amount that I need when I'm playing. And yeah, I hope it does. But if you find out that your muslin definitely does not have enough space for you to extend as much as you need, then you will need to cut out another muslin. And you know, it's not uncommon to make 1, 2, 3, 4 muslins to get a well-fitting pair of pants. And I think it is totally worth it. But if you have 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, you might get away with having enough space there for what you need. So in total contrast of what I said about the flat seat adjustment, this would be a full seat adjustment of sorts. If you just made a muslin without measuring yourself or doing anything like that and just made the pant as is and found that you needed extra length in the crotch at the back, that your bottom just definitely does not have enough space there and your thighs are tight, the adjustment in conjunction of adding length to the rise and adding extension to the inseam in general together is sort of called a full seat adjustment. Sometimes also a bit of width is added there, but I am not going to those adjustments because I am assuming that your lengths are correct because you have measured yourself and you have adjusted the pattern accordingly. Now, whether that total length at the back needs to be more on that crotch curve and less on the top, it's all to be determined with your muslin, and I think you can get a good fit if you take this approach in steps, just being methodical, going from the top down to the bottom. Now, staying at the top area of the pants, specifically in the front, I did also want to include adjustments done with a protruding abdomen. I thought about how I could try to replicate this on myself with the muslins that I was working with. And then I got the idea to do it in a different way. My measurements have increased over the last couple of months, especially in lockdown and in winter. And I do have an abdomen there to play with. So I went and got a pair of pants I made last year. And I had the sneaky suspicion that they were going to fit really tight in the abdomen area. They did fit well when I made them, but I remembered the last time I wore them, they were fitted there and they did show what I needed to show you. So I'm going to show you a pair of pants I have already made myself, and so that you can see how the pants look on the front when the abdomen is creating excess volume there on the high hip area, and how we can adjust a pattern to accommodate for that abdomen there. You can see I have a abdomen there, so I've got something to mark where my belly button is right there, and I like this to just cover it, you know, and this has gone down to accommodate for that little curve right there. The other thing, you can see the pulling going like this, and in more severe cases you might have excess fabric here on the crotch. It's not my case. I think the hips are fine still, it's just above. So usually this adjustment needs to happen above the full hip. So the full hip is there, the waist is there, so it's sort of just like the high hip, the mid hip area. And another thing you can see, the side seam, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it, but it's not hanging straight down, it's pulling towards the front. And it's basically the protruding abdomen there, just trying to push the fabric forward. I am not going to go ahead and destroy these pants, of course, because they're nice. But if this were a muslin, what I would do is just unsew this area here, just partially up to there, let it relax, see how much extra is needed there, so that this seam relaxes and goes back to where it needs to be, nice and straight, not pushing forward. And then I would need to add a bit of width and a bit of length. I am obviously not going to unsew that center front seam. These are nice linen pants. I will keep them as they are. The fit on the hips was okay, it's just above the hip. So if this is happening to you with your pair of pants, you know, you have a waistband there on your muslin, of course, you know, just measure from the top, measure down onto your abdomen where the fullest part of the tummy is, and then just remember where that is on the actual pant. And I will show you in the little pattern pieces, and I am just doing a middle area between the full hip and the waist, so around the high hip area. Usually that's where the fullest part of the abdomen is, and that is where I'm going to show you how you can adjust to add width to the center of those pants and add length to accommodate to go around the curve there of the abdomen. We're looking at the front of a pant. I'll close up on this area to see what we do about that abdomen. Okay, I have drawn a line across here at the hip, but I've just drawn that line to show you that that's not where we do the adjustment, because our abdomen is above that. So you saw when I was fitting my pants that the hips were actually okay. Usually our abdominal protuberance is up here higher. So from your waistband, just measure down where the fullest part was of the abdomen of the tummy. It could be a half point between here and there, or it could be higher. Just measure on your body and mark a line there where the fullest part is on the body. And let's just draw a line here. You will need to draw another line in the middle of this area. And then from this little point that intersects there towards the side seam there. Now the little lines that we're going to cut, we're not going to cut through the side seam, just up to the side seam. And that's why I have the side seams marked in red right there. Where we will be cutting, I will try and mark in red on top of what I marked in black. But it's from the center front of the pants to that point there at the middle of that line, and then diagonally up to there. So we're going to cut there, and then from there to there, but not through that, because we need a hinge point there. And up here, remember not to cut through the side seam, just leave the side seam there. And now in this one, we will cut up to that dot, but not through the dot, so that we can hinge right there. Okay, remember I told you that what could be done with the muslin is unsew this area there to see how much it needs to spread, so that the side seam can relax and then just fall in the center of the leg and go straight down instead of pulling forwards. Well, measure that gap in the center. That gap will include one front and the other front. So let's say that measurement was an inch. Maybe you need to extend your pattern this way half an inch, because it'll be half, you're just working with one leg. And you also need to add a bit of length as well. So when you do this, you see the pink underneath. When you take this, extend this part to the center. This allows you to extend this part there towards the center, adding width right there, and also adding length. And this will give more space for the tummy right there without altering the side seam there. That stays the same. Now the top there, you see it's created a bit of space as a dot, and These are pull-on elastic pants. They don't need a dart there. So you can keep that as extra width on the front just to give it a bit more ease. Whatever amount you have extra there, say it's 1/4 inch, you will need to add that to your front waistband so that they do match when you sew your pants on. If you're working with a pant that doesn't have an elasticated waist, that does have a waistband, you might want to add this dart in there if it didn't have it, and it will just give you a better fit across the tummy and on the waistline. It's up to you. Now that this has come forward, this has added width to the center right there. So this will be a shape that will be curved. The shape now will be curved in like that, slightly, and then tapering back in to the crotch area. When you look at it, it will look strange because it's not straight like the pattern originally was, but the curve in this shape there will fit the curve of the abdominal protuberance that we saw on my pants. So just do that. And you don't need to add any more seam allowance or anything. We are working with a pattern here that has seam allowance, so you just go ahead and sew like you were. It's just that this has been modified to have extra width there, and then just go back in there and see how that works for you. I like this adjustment best because it adds width and it adds length. The protuberance there, the roundness of the belly, makes the pants go down, and then this might pull up because the pant is trying to go over the little bump there that we have on our tummy. So adding the length there and the width will solve the problem really nicely. There are many ways to do these adjustments, but I really like this one. I thought it made total sense. The way that the lines were cut to leave the side seams untouched, to have that waistline come up a little bit without modifying its shape, although a little tiny bit was added due to that opening that little dart created. You don't need to close that dart. You can just adjust your waistband to fit that. You will have an elastic in there, so it won't really upset anything. And then you will just have a different shape on that front crotch curve. It will just be a little bit curved on the top and then just go back in, and then you can continue, and you can try and see if that gives enough space for the center front of the pants and your abdomen to let that side seam relax and just fall straight down without having it pulling towards the front like you saw on the pants that I showed you on myself. Now going further down the pants, there is an area that causes fitting issues for a lot of people, and that is the calf area. Lots of people have a fuller calf, and if the pant pattern you're working with is slightly tapered in, the calf underneath the pants will fill in that space in a different way, and it can create fitting issues behind the knee, further up the thigh, and it will be also very uncomfortable for you to wear pants like this. Now, the pants I am referring to in this series, in the Let's Sew Easy Pants series, none of them are fitted woven pants. Some of them are slightly tapered in at the leg. They are woven, but it might be that your calf is just large for the size that you need for your hips, for your waist, and you might end up with uncomfortable calves down there. So I tried to replicate a tight calf of my muslin. It was impossible. I just couldn't get it right, but I did pin it out in the front just to make it tight by force, so you can see how that looks on the back, and actually how you can measure your calf and how to do a reference mark on your muslin of where your calves actually are very accurately, because it will be on your body so that you can transfer that mark onto your pattern so you can adjust. So let's see that. So I've just pinned along the front just to make it tight there. Basically, if you have a tight calf, you're just gonna have folds below the knee area. All this because the fabric is just trying to pull up to find a wider space to fit the calves. So you'll have excess folds there and excessive tightness when you fold your leg. You will feel the fabric pulling across the back there where the calf muscle is. That won't happen on the other leg where my calf fits nicely. I have an elastic tied around my calf, and I can see it's the fullest part of my calf there. It's just easier to have that reference so I can measure around it. So whatever that number is, just measure it. Nice and snug, write that down. And then just leave that elastic there. Just leave it in place. Bring your muslin leg over it. Turn around and have your assistant feel for where that elastic is, and just place some marks right in the middle. Right, put it in the middle of my leg while you're standing straight. So now I know that that is the fullest part of my calf in reference to these pants. I can transfer that mark onto the actual pattern piece on the paper, and then I can adjust. I had a little helper, my son put a little dot on my pants so that I know that that is the fullest part of my calf on these pants. I then can get my pattern piece and measure and see exactly where it is and mark it there on the piece of paper. And now we can go ahead and do some little cuts that will add space for the calves. I like this method. Let's see how it's done. With this one, I'm going to show you how to adjust for a calf that doesn't fit the pants, that is wider than the pants, that is extended towards the back, maybe a more muscular calf or just a larger calf in general. This adjustment won't modify the length of these seams, so it will still match the front piece. Now, if the adjustment you need is very, very small, maybe at the calf level that you can mark here on the leg, you can let go of the side seams a little. Most of the times when this happens, seam allowance actually isn't enough to allow enough ease at the calf for most people. And you would try on your muslin, get someone to help you, and just mark the fullest part of the calf on the back so you know where it is located on the pattern. If the pattern that you're working with doesn't give you a finished calf measurement according to the sizes, you will need to measure that. So I have a front here and I have a back there. I have marked with a black dot the placement of the calf on the body. You will mark that position with your muslin on. Have someone help you mark at the back where your calf is, and then continue that to the front. And then you will measure across from there to there. You can see the seam allowances are drawn there, so you won't be measuring from the edge of the paper to edge of the paper, but from the sewing line to the sewing line. Measure there. And then at the back, measure from there to there. Add those two measurements and you will have what the finished calf is on your particular pattern. That number, write it down, measure your calf, see if your calf will fit into there. If it barely fits into there and it's going to be tight, you will need to add at the back. Hopefully, if it's a tapered leg pattern style, you will need at least 1.5 to 2 inches of positive ease to be able to bend your leg and to walk. So you would need your finished measurement to be at least 1.5 to 2 inches bigger than your calf measurement. But you won't be adding what you need to both legs, you just be adding it to the back. So we will get rid of the front leg and we will just need to work on the back. Remember, mark that place well where your calf is located, and then we're going to do different things to make different lines of cuts so we can open this area up to allow the space you need. Let's say that it's just right there. Now let's make a mark above that, maybe 1.5 inches above that, so it's not right on the calf. From the inseam here, let's make another mark. It doesn't have to be exact, but just lower, let's say 3 inches down. Make a point right there. And on the side seam here, let's just choose a point around the middle of the length there. It doesn't need to be exact. So from the point there that is further up from the calf measurement, let's draw a little line there and a little line over there, and then we'll extend this one down there. So these 2 points are there and there, we won't cut through them, we'll just get to the side seam there before it ends. You can see that red area there, and then the rest will cut. Okay, let's say that you measured your calf, compared to the pattern, figured out what the difference is, and let's say you need to add 1 inch. At the point there where we mark the reference where our calf was, this black point that you can see there that has been cut in half, this is the area where you would add that inch. When you add that inch, that opens up area above the calf and around the calf, as you can see, all the way from the leg down. And you see it doesn't modify this length here, it doesn't modify this length here. So your back pant is still going to fit with your front pant as normal. And then what you need to do here is just even out this hemline. It might curve depending on how much you added. And now you will have extra space in the center of the leg at the calf level, and it will still fit your inseam with your front and your side seam with the front normally. It's just that you've created more space there by doing these little cuts. As you can see there, just a few cuts. You don't need to be that specific. You just need to add that space at the back. Figure out how much your pattern is. The pattern I'm working on right now does not give you finished garment measurements for the calf area, although I have seen other patterns that do have the calf area there marked for you in the chart. So have a look at the pattern. Otherwise, just measure it yourself like I've shown you. Figure out what your calf is, what the difference is. You do need at least 1.5 to 2 inches of positive ease for a tapered leg style. If you're using a wide leg style, you are not going to have calf issues, I assume, because they're just going to fall down from your hips. You know, your calves will be in there happily with all the space you need. The next video in this series will be the finale. I will show you a finished pair of pants that fit me the best I can get them to fit me, and I will go over everything that has been done to get the pants to fit me, and it'll be a summary of sorts of all the topics that we have discussed in this series. I really hope it's helping you. I have had so many wonderful comments, your feedback about how this is helping you, and that makes me extremely happy, makes all this work worth it. And I'm just hoping this series will be there for years to come for lots of people to see and improve their journey in pant making. It's my goal that you get yourself a good pair of pants that you can make yourself with the fabric that you like, that fit you the best you can. It will be such a boost for you in your journey, and then you can just build up on that and it'll be amazing. I promise making pants makes all the difference and makes sewing really, really worth it. More than making the tops and blouses, because I think those take less effort. And buying pants in the shops can be an experience that is not so nice for so many of us. So have fun, make yourself some pants, and I will see you very soon with another sewing video. Bye!
Ooh.